All right, so we're going to be taking a look at the Vivaldi Concerto in G minor, the first movement, and we're looking for measures 1 through 26 today. This is sort of like the introduction to the piece, so it's a little bit on the easier end than some of the other techniques we'll run into later, but it's a really good starting point because it gets you in the mindset of the key signature. So the first thing that I would suggest before we even look at the key signature is that you take some time to listen through this piece. If you know what it's supposed to sound like, then as you're practicing, if something doesn't sound quite right, you can say, hang on a second, I know from listening to it that something's a little out of tune and I need to fix it. So taking time to listen and know what it's supposed to sound like. And then we really need to think through this key signature because it's not a key signature we deal with often. G minor has 2 flats in it, so we're looking at B flat and E flat. So that means a couple of things. First of all, this entire introduction from measures 1 through 26 is played on the A and E string. And actually a good chunk of this piece is played on the A and E string. You do go down to the other two, but not as often as you play on A and E. Your general finger pattern for the A and E strings is going to be a whole half or a 3/4 pattern, but it's going to start in half position. So your first finger is going to be pulled back to the note B flat, then you're going to have a whole step, half step. This note with your pinky now is playing the note E flat, which is really important. If you have E flats in the key signature, it means you cannot play your open E string. So unless it says E natural, we have to avoid our open E string throughout this entire piece. So you have your B flat, C natural, D natural, and then close pinky for E flat. And then the nice thing about this is it's actually identical on the E string. So it's a low one for an F natural, space to G, space to A, and then your pinky plays a B flat. So you may have done this before. You might remember playing a B flat major scale. This is the finger pattern for a B flat major scale. So you're keeping your hand pulled back in that half position, which feels a little weird at first, but if you recognize that your hand basically stays there for the whole piece unless you shift, that does make it a little bit easier to wrap your head around. So if we take a look at the beginning, we can start in that pattern in that half position, but you can see right off the bat, you actually have a regular first finger there that in the first complete measure, remember you don't count the pickup as a measure. In the first complete measure, we have an F sharp. So instead of looking like this, you're actually going to pull your first finger up just for that one note. Okay, and this is what it's going to sound like. And I'm playing that slower than it's supposed to be, but it's to get it in our ears. You'll notice after that F sharp, the G goes right next to it. I would recommend, I'm going to write it in on my paper so I can remember that I told you to write it. Marking a half step between that F sharp and that G. Your first and second fingers will be touching there. And again, that's one of the only times that's going to happen in this piece is when it's an F sharp to a G, because normally it's an F natural, so you'd have a whole step there. So listen to it again. It sounds like this. Okay, from that point on, we then go back to the whole half, the 3/4 pattern in half position for a good chunk of the next line and a half. Then we have to shift. So I'm going to go from the beginning. After that F sharp, pull your first finger back, and you should be able to play along with most of this. So here we go. Four. Okay, hopefully we made it. All in first position, well, technically all in half position, but there's no shifting required, right? Now we're getting to a shift. So the next part should look similar to the beginning. Now they've asked you to go to third position. So go ahead and mark that. This is measure 9. Go ahead and mark third position there. It'll be 1/4. And then this is a 1-2 pattern. So in the next measure, measure 10, you see an E flat and a D, 2-1. It would not hurt to mark that as a half step, so you know that those fingers are close to each other. So we've changed our finger pattern. In third position on the A string, it's a 1-2 pattern. So we've been used to this for the whole piece so far, and now we're doing this. Okay, so you only stay in third position for a little bit. 2, 1, 2, and you can see in the music at measure 11, they say to do 2 and then back to first position with 3 fingers. I actually think it's easier to go 2, 1 and then shift back on the F sharp. It's up to you. For me, that just makes more sense. But either way, whatever way you're going to do it, go ahead and mark that you go back to first position. So mark that you're back to first position on an F sharp, and from the F sharp, it sounds like this. Okay, so let's go from the pickup to measure 8. Pick up measure 8 and get that shifted. So ready, here we go. Here's a shift. There's first position. Good. All right, so now we're looking at the pickup to measure 14, and you can see in measure 14, they have you back to F naturals. They didn't have to mark that. That's a courtesy accidental to remind you now that your first finger is back as an F natural, since you haven't played that note yet in this piece. And most of this, again, is in first position. All of it's in first position, just with that 3-4 pattern. So let's go ahead together and play from the pickup to measure 14. So ready, here we go. 4 fingers. Good, hopefully you caught that F sharp. Now the next part here, it's the pickup to measure 21. Still in that same position. D flat. Now third position, 4 fingers at the high D. 3, 2, 1. And again, you might want to mark that it's the 2 and 1 are close. It's the same thing on the E string. Okay, so you're when you go to third and mark your third position, sorry. So you go up to that high D. That should be a pretty comfortable note to find at this point. Okay, so 4, 3, 2, 1. Then a replacement shift. You go back to first position. All right, go ahead and mark that spot where you go back to first. You only go to third first. A little tiny bit there in that measure 20, end of 23 and 24. Okay, so a couple of things to consider before we play this all together. First of all, I am leaving out talking about the dynamics. We haven't done that yet, and I think it's more important that you get the notes first, then we can add in the dynamics. So you only have to worry about one thing at a time. In the measures where you have F sharp, you're doing a finger pattern that we almost never do. It looks like this. Okay, it's a close 1 and 2 and a close 3 and 4 with a space between 2 and 3. So just recognize that when they add the F sharp, that's the finger pattern you get. So in any regular scale pattern, you would never have that finger pattern, but because there's an accidental, because they made the F natural and F sharp, we now have to deal with that kind of weird pattern. And it does feel strange, so just recognizing that hopefully will make it a little easier to get. Always remembering that you cannot play open E. Okay, that's really important. It will stick out like a sore thumb if you play open E. There are not any E naturals throughout this, so it's always 4 fingers. And then just always remembering that your hand's got to be back in that half position. That first finger is low, a low 1, unless it says otherwise, which I think it's only, let me just check here. Yes, it's only with the F sharps. You always have a B flat. So hopefully that's, again, helpful to know. It's always, for this section, going to be low 1 on the A string. There are some B naturals coming up, but we'll deal with those later. Okay, so we're going to play this whole section. I'm going to do it slowly like I just did once, and then I'll do it a little bit faster so you can try it both tempos. Okay, so setting our hand, ready, here we go. Shift, close to. Now we go back to first. Here comes the shift. Awesome. All right. Hopefully we made it through that. I'm going to do it again a little bit faster, not the actual tempo. The actual tempo is very quick. We'll work on that later, but I just want to bump it up just a little bit so you can have an opportunity to try it a little bit faster. All right. Just to give you an idea, the actual tempo is closer to this. But I'm not going to go quite that fast. Okay. So we're going to try to go 1 and 2 and ready. Here we go. Shift. Back to first. Third. All right. Hopefully this gave you a good start to this piece. Next time we'll start going over some of those strange things that start to happen in the next section.